Hey, hello again. So, yeah, what's going on? I would have predicted, but by now the world economy would be actually in a state of collapse. You could strongly argue that it's in tatters and is just literally dragging itself along the floor, but it hasn't actually collapsed as such. I'm quite surprised at this. I would have expected it to have happened perhaps even 2 years ago. But against all predictions and expectations, this inevitable collapse still hasn't happened. So why? Why is that? One must ask. Okay, well, if we look at um, what's going wrong with the economy, for starters, you see the bond market's absolutely crucified. You know, the level of debt is incredible. So domestic debt, corporate debt, every kind of debt, to be honest. Credit cards, you name it, mortgages, um, bad loans, sort of absolutely incredible, actually beyond the 2008 levels. The dollar seems to be in its death throes. Um, you know, people are going to gold. There's a huge move in the last week or so to move gold reserves, with Saudi Arabia and various African countries getting their reserves out of the USA. India's taken 100 tons of its gold reserves away from the UK. Everyone's repatriating their gold, right? So that's a very, very bad sign. And then there's the real estate. I mean, what happened with Evergrande in China could have caused a meltdown, but it somehow didn't. What happened with Deutsche Bank should have caused a meltdown, and somehow they managed to paper over the cracks. And the same with Credit Suisse. That should have been a massive disaster. Um, But what they've been doing is sort of not reporting things very much in the mainstream media. All these banks collapsing in America, that's been done very quietly. They've been quietly propped up or refinanced or bought by somebody else very, very quietly. I think it's all about maintaining confidence, because like a lot of the banks are actually technically insolvent, really. They're on the verge of collapsing. All it takes would be even a small percentage of people deciding to remove their money from the bank because they have no confidence would cause like bank runs and banks to collapse. So by just not talking about it, I think they've managed to sort of keep this whole thing scraping along. And it is like a zombie. Like there's huge corporations that are zombies, banks that are zombies. They're really not actually viable at all, but because a lot of people don't realize how bad things really are, it just keeps on going. It's a bit like the emperor's new clothes until somebody significant actually says, hey, the emperor's got no clothes on, and everyone takes note of it. The emperor can keep walking around naked and no one seems to care. So I think we're in that kind of situation, but this cannot last forever. It really, really cannot last forever. It's impossible. I'm just amazed that that sort of levitation of the world economy is still happening. It's a bit like that moment where Wile E. Coyote falls off a cliff. But, as he goes over the edge of the cliff, he kind of runs like a couple of meters in thin air. And he's like levitating, and then suddenly he goes, "Woo," and crashes down into the ground. We're at that point in time where we're actually levitating on thin air. How long that can last for is anyone's guess. I'm really shocked it's still going. I would predict that by the time of the American election in November, we will no longer be levitating and we'll be in free fall. It might take till Christmas possibly, but I very, very much doubt it because all of the indicators across the world are so poor, so bad, that I'm just amazed that there's any confidence in the stock market, which is at all-time highs, and confidence in the employment sector, which again, unemployment is incredibly low in a lot of countries, but it disguises the fact that people have multiple jobs. Some people have 3 part-time jobs, and even a lot of those people in 1, 2, or 3 jobs aren't earning enough money to actually keep their heads above water. So all of this is very unsustainable. But somehow confidence in the system continues, incredibly so. I don't know how that's being maintained, because I think that the pundits, the people that are running everything, they realise how bad everything is. It's just the majority of the world doesn't realise how bad it is, and it's like, shh, don't tell anyone, keep quiet. Let's keep this going for as long as we can. And you've got a deflation problem in China now. I mean, their economy is still growing, albeit slowly, but it's one of the very few economies around the world that's actually growing. Russia is actually doing really well, surprisingly, despite all these sanctions. But then they have a very low level of national debt to start with, one of the few countries that isn't up to its eyeballs in debt. I mean, as far as deficits, I mean, the USA is a basket case. I think it's 1.7 trillion for the year so far, 32 trillion sort of minimums of national debt. It's a lot more if you include certain items. Japan, ridiculous. UK, ridiculous. Germany, it's been getting worse because of their energy policies and the sanctions. Most of the EU is a basket case. Ireland is an exception to that. And then you have Turkey, they've like rampant 80% inflation. They're in a terrible shape. A lot of South America, Argentina, many other, Venezuela, loads of other countries in terrible, terrible shape. So, I mean, no one can actually claim that the world is in good shape economically. A lot of countries are already in technical recessions. So, there's nowhere to go except down into sort of like a collapse, or at least a partial collapse, a correction that has to happen in order for things to actually begin recovering again. And it is inevitable. Every single bubble in the history of finance, in the history of the world, has popped eventually. I suppose the big issue here is predicting when it's going to happen, when to get out, when to jump off the bus. If the bus is about to jump over a cliff, but the longer you stay on the bus, the more money you're going to make, then people want to time it so they get off at the last minute. And if you're still on the bus once it's gone over the cliff, then you're in big, big trouble. So that's what this game is all about. But, as is what happened in the 1920s, like 1929 onwards for several years. I mean, that crash wasn't instant. It happened over a period of about 4 years, more or less, of slides and slides and more slides. A lot of people were involved in the stock market who didn't really know anything about finance and speculating. Everyone was getting in on it. I mean, the smart money got out before the crash, and a lot of people suffered. And I think we're in that position now where there's lots of people speculating using software on their phone to buy shares. They don't know anything about what they're doing. So there's a lot of false confidence based on very little information and a crazy belief that the sun will continue shining forever and there will be no sunset, which obviously is incorrect. So, I mean, just like in the 30s where a lot of people lost their shirts, I think a lot of investors, people who, have a bit of money, decide to put it here, there, whatever, in bonds or in stocks and shares, they're going to lose a lot. And a lot of property speculators, small time as well as big, could be in for losing a lot of money too. So this is going to happen. But I think just through a lot of financial trickery and sort of being very, very careful in gatekeeping bad news, that the world economy has somehow kept going. I can't think of any other reason why it's still afloat, because the fundamentals are absolutely terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. They could barely, I don't think they've ever been any worse, really, than they are now at any time in the last century or so. So I think it's mostly down to deception, concealment, and sort of just not talking about things, that everything is still keeping going. So yeah. I would love to be wrong, and everyone can say, "I told you so." It's, you know, it's all brilliant. But I think, unfortunately, what's going to happen is that belatedly, I will be proved right, along with all the other people who are convinced a mega crash is coming. I really wish I was wrong. I don't want to see people suffer, and people lose their shirts, lose their businesses, lose their homes, etc., etc. But I very much doubt that's going to happen. So I would suggest, you know, hold on to your hat and get ready for a precipitous decline and a massive everything crash that's in the post. And this is like going to be the biggest bubble burst in the whole of recent history, I would say. By recent, I mean the last century or so. So anyway, that's all I have to say on the subject. If you've any thoughts on this, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, if you agree with me. And also, if you think I'm full of it and I'm totally wrong, then, you know, please feel free to tell me why I'm wrong in the comments there. And yeah, if anything you've got to say, I'm always interested to read the comments, and I will often reply as well if it's something interesting or something I've got more thoughts on. So anyway, thanks for watching, and let's just hope this doesn't turn out to be as bad as I predict, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. That's it for now. Bye-bye.